but just everybody hang on to that. This is the beginning of the process. I have to make a point of the picture. Isn't that a gorgeous picture? And really, the thanks go to Marketing and Communication and Sharon Buchanan. And Sharon made the PowerPoint. I'd like to thank. And there was a little trick to this slide because she had to take 2 photos and put them together to actually give us this landscape, but we think it's just, gorgeous. Today you'll be hearing obviously from me, but you'll hear from Executive Vice President and Provost Hecker. You'll hear from our Chief Business Officer, Claire Strickland. You'll hear from the UMaine System Chief Financial Officer, Ryan Lowe. And because we'll be, interleaving ourselves, I think it would actually be it'll work out best if we can go through the whole presentation and then do Q&A. We are happy to put up any slide that anybody wants to talk about, but I think it's easier if we don't interrupt each of us with questions and then try to get through all of this and actually have us keep track of who's supposed to be up here. What is the point of today's gathering? And it's really to lay out our process and to remind you, and hopefully you'll see as the year unfolds, that this is going to be a very similar approach to last year. We'll be out and about on campus. We intend to have multiple sessions, and as the year progresses and as we go out in the future, you'll see every time we come forward, we will have more detail. Today, we will have relatively little detail, and that's because we don't have any more detail to share. We're catching you up to where we are. I'll also describe the communication plan, because we really do want communication not only from us to you, but from you to us. So my personal goals for the process, beyond the actual creation of a balanced budget, is to really engage the campus in a conversation. Periodically, it will be in this large scale format, large audience format. Beyond that, hopefully more smaller conversations. All of us are out and about, and I certainly am out and about on campus, and I view it as whenever I'm wandering around, I am truly in play. So anybody can stop me and talk to me and ask me questions. That's really the point of being out and about, aside from the fact that I get tired of being in my office. But beyond that, we will explain to you how we are looking for input, and we're looking for electronic input. So really, let us know what you're thinking. Let us know your questions as we proceed across the year. It's absolutely true that the only way, the best work is done by all of us, and the best work is done by capitalizing on the creativity and the talents of everybody on this campus. And the only way to do that is for everybody to really get engaged and think as we go through the year. There's a famous saying, it says, none of us is as smart as all of us, and that really is true. We've got a campus of very, very smart, talented people. Everybody's got to sort of lean into this. And the other point that I have as a goal is that our budget really needs to reflect our campus's priorities. And I think you'll see that as we go forward, but certainly those are topics for discussion. So the agenda today, I'll talk about the organizational chart, and when I get there, you'll understand why I'm doing that. I'll talk about principles. We'll hear about the timeline. This is for FY17, so the budget we are building that will start next July 1 is FY17. We will also get some information from Ryan Lowe about the process around getting ready for the FY18 budget, which is truly our first truly unified budget. We'll talk about enrollment changes from historical perspective and our projection for enrollment. We'll talk about an enrollment plan for fall of 16. We'll reflect a bit on the New England land grant prices, the E&G budget that we're currently in, projected costs and revenue adjustments, and next steps. And I think one of the words you'll hear often today is enrollment. The big takeaway here is enrollment really matters. And it is incumbent on everyone to see that and to recognize that we all play a role. It does not matter what your job is on this campus. We all play a role in enrollment. It's not just the people who happen to be in the departments headed up under the umbrella of enrollment management. It's often the smallest things. It's little things that can really matter when people are visiting campus. If you're out on campus and you see people that seem to be confused or standing there struggling with a map, don't seem to know where the buildings are, introduce yourself and offer to help. And basically, I'm not asking anyone to do anything that they wouldn't appreciate having done to them if they were in some place that was unfamiliar and, frankly, they were lost. Treat people the way you want to be treated, and that really that pays huge benefits for us as a university because this is a fabulous community, and we all know it. The trick is letting other people who don't know us yet know it. Okay, now let me go on and talk about the org chart. I admit you can't read what's in the boxes, but if you go to the president's website, you will be able to see this, and then you can read the small print. And really what I want to do is make a couple points about the color coding and what has happened over time and the changes that have occurred. The green boxes, so over here, these boxes denote areas that are no longer under the budgetary authority of the campus. And so here we have human resources, here we have, I think it says finance right there, and you'll see here we have Claire Strickland. Claire Strickland is a 40-year employee of the University of Maine, although technically at this point in time, she now works for the University of Maine system. And she reports to Ryan Lowe, who a year ago at this time was the University of Maine's Vice President for Finance, and who is now the University of Maine system Chief Financial Officer. And Ryan is sitting right here. Ryan's office is on this campus in the same office suite that Claire is in. But it's important that people recognize that some of these areas no longer report up through me. They report through Ryan or other people and go right up to the system office. The areas that are in blue, these areas are those areas of the campus that are truly under the budgetary authority, ultimately under my office. But obviously there's a lot of people involved in running this campus. We have the president's office here, we have athletics, the art museum, the Hudson Museum, the Collins Center. Over here we have student affairs, headed up by Vice President for Student Affairs and Dean of Students, Robert Dana. And then this area here, the largest area, and always historically and in the future, the largest division on campus, academic affairs, headed up by Executive Vice President and Provost Jeffrey Hecker. Now, under academic affairs, you all know pretty much what's there. We have the colleges, we have enrollment management. Here's Joel Winkowski, our Vice President for Enrollment Management. Here we have Carol Kim, so we have the research enterprise, all of the research institutes, and she is also Dean of the Graduate School. Over here we have Jake Ward, who's the Vice President for Innovation and Economic Development. So all of this is under the broad umbrella of academic affairs. And I'm going through this because as we go forward and build a budget and address the structural gap, we now have fewer areas to call on. And if you think back on what has occurred over this year, you notice that IT has essentially migrated away from campus, HR, finance, procurement, part of facilities. And although we're not going into any numerical analyses today, we have fewer, for lack of a more technical term, fewer buckets to call on as we address the structural gap. So when you look at academic affairs, it accounts for 74% of our E&G-based budget. Last year when we addressed our gap, which was about $8 million, the actual when all was said and done, we addressed that gap by taking 35% from academic affairs. So it occupied 74% of the E&G budget, and yet we addressed the gap by only, I realize it's painful, but only taking 35% from academic affairs. That was because we had all of these other portfolios that were still within the budgetary authority of the university. I'm just making this point because this will come up over and over again as we proceed through the year, not as we go into, there's no detail today. Just want to make sure I'm saying everything I want to. Yes. I'd say that in simplest terms, we just have fewer buckets, and we're going to have to be very mindful of that as we proceed. Key principles in decision making. First of all, we want the principles and the process to be transparent It's also important that in addition to creating a balanced budget, which I know everybody in the room understands we have to do, we also have to address key areas related to the university's strategic priorities. We still have to make investments in areas related to strategic strengths, areas that we as a campus have agreed are of great importance to us. We also want to minimize the impact on student learning, research, and enrollment. We sort of think of this as the student-facing side of the enterprise, students, undergraduate, and graduate. So we look at academic affairs, student affairs, and research. Those are the areas that have the greatest student face to them. And the last thing is, and I know this is always on everybody's mind, and everybody in this community cares about everybody else in this community, but we do try to, as best we can, minimize impact on employees. There will be constraints on our maneuverability, and that was why I went into more detail about the org chart than I think I ever would have in the past. But I just want everybody to understand what has happened. And with that, I will turn it over to Claire Strickland. You want this thing? Oh, yeah, you want this one.
Okay, so we'll go into the timeline. Can you hear me? Okay. So the timeline, there are key dates to the... Is this on?
You have to turn this on.
Can you hear me now? Okay, sorry. There are key dates in the timeline for the FY17 budget prep. You need to know that the management team, we've been at this for quite a while. We might be November 9th today, but we've been working on FY17 even before FY15 was closed. So back in July, we started creating budget meetings. I call them Tuesday mornings with Sue and the management team, where we would look at various needs of the campus. We first focused on trying to figure out what our enrollment would be for not only the fall of 2015, but actually move it forward a year for FY17 enrollment, which is the fall of 2016. So we were watching our census data very carefully as it became apparent on October 15th, and we projected to FY17. I'm sorry, I'm rattling. So we worked with Ted Coladarchi and Deb Allen in institutional research to refine those fall 2016 projections so that we could mitigate the gaps. It's all about revenue. It's not necessarily about expense. We need to have strong enrollment in order to meet our budget. So we did that during the course of September and October. We received our budget materials from the system office as they applied to allocations and assumptions in building our FY17 budget. And we did finalize a very preliminary gap just this past week. And as I said, it's very preliminary. We will continue to modify our assumptions. We will continue to try to scratch out as much revenue as we can on the revenue side. But we need to send our budgets out to the campus. And so later on this week, the deans, vice presidents, directors will most likely receive a number by which to build, to create their budgets for FY17. We will try to give all of the budget forms that need to be filled out by the various areas. We'll try to get that out to the campus before Thanksgiving. And so that by the beginning of January, after the holidays, we should be receiving information from each of the various areas as to what they have projected to meet their budgets. And we will submit that to the Finance, Facilities, and Technology Committee of the BOT in February. At each point that we're presenting to that committee, we need to be balanced. but we also need impact statements. So the provost and the various areas will be requesting impact statements as to what we had to do to balance the budget. And we'll continue to refine so that by the time we get to March and April, perhaps some of the assumptions might change. We'll refine numbers, and we'll present again to the FFT committee and present a consolidated budget for all of the campuses within the University of Maine system. And then as we get to May, the Board of Trustees will approve our final budget. So it's a year-long process with multiple years phasing into the other.
I just wanted to touch a little bit on the FY18 unified budget. You'll see a little later in the schedule we've got a specific forum for that where we'll come and talk certainly in a lot more detail. But as you may have heard, we focused, the CBOs, myself, the system finance staff, we focused on about 6 kind of key areas that we need to look at as we transition from the current approach to budgeting to this unified budget that the trustees have set an FY18 date for. And those include things like what is the tuition policy going to be? How are we going to allocate resources out? How are we going to handle reserves, both on a going forward basis and how they exist currently on the campuses? So since July, we've been working with the CBOs to identify, first to identify those 6 areas, and then really ask the questions that you would think of in each one of those areas. So how are we going to do reserves? What's the impact going to be in this area? What's the impact going to be on auxiliaries? What's the impact going to be on E&G? And so really kind of identifying what those questions are. We met for a full day. We've been meeting on a weekly basis. We met for a full day last week. Have really kind of drilled down to the part of the process now where we're putting together sub-teams in each of those areas. We'll develop a schedule where we go out and identify all of the stakeholders. Everyone will be a stakeholder in each of these areas, but certainly if we start talking about tuition policy or financial aid policy, we're going to want to have financial aid directors there. We're going to want to have enrollment managers there. And so we've identified those stakeholders that we need as part of our team and those that we need to check in with on a regular basis and have put together a pretty aggressive schedule to get us the place where we need to be by next July, but also that builds in enough time for feedback, significant feedback, significant input in each of those areas. While all of us come to the table with our own thoughts, we have not made decisions in any of these areas, so we'll be looking for a healthy dialogue back and forth. And again, I'll be back, I think in December for a full discussion on each of these initiatives.
And I'm just going to use my Psych 100 voice. So my job is to talk with you about enrollment. And as the president and Claire Strickland explained, enrollment is essential to our budgetary health. And so I want to show you a little bit about sort of the historically where we've been in terms of enrollment and what we've done to address some of the enrollment challenges, and a little bit about the projection for next year, because that's an important piece of the the building of the budget. So this is our enrollment history. Let's see if I got the right button here. No. You can see over the years we decreased in years after 2008. We had enrollment drops, and in the last 3 years we've been able to get back up to and above the areas we were around 2009. We included in here the undergraduate and graduate enrollments, and you'll see that we've been recouping our enrollment by growing on the undergraduate credit hours. In case you want to be clear, we don't have that many students. That's credit hours. So that's what we really care about with respect to the budget. We care about the students, but with respect to the budget, we want to look at credit hours. So you can see that we've done that through undergraduate enrollment, and that we've had a decrease in graduate enrollment in the last several years. We are taking steps to address that. We're working with Vice President and Dean of Graduate School, Carol Kim, and we're working with the Division of Lifelong Learning to do some more things online, and to look at ways that we can create more support for graduate students to reverse those numbers. This is what we're projecting for next year. We're projecting a slight increase in graduate and then an increase in undergraduate student credit hours. Just again to give you a big picture on this. There it is. Okay, so these are data about demographics of the state of Maine graphed against our credit hours. So if you look at this bar, if you've attended these talks over the years, we always show this. This is the change in high school graduates from 2000 to 2025. And what the percent change is the percent compared to the number of high school graduates in the year 2000. So you can see that our enrollment in credit hours essentially paralleled the general increase in the number of high school students coming out of Maine high schools. And that's not surprising, because historically about 85% of the students enrolled at the University of Maine came from the state of Maine. Now what we've been able to do, well, you see, as the high school enrollments dropped off, our credit hours dropped off, we've been able to bend or break that trend and improve our credit hours even as the number of high school graduates go down. But you can see the challenges that lie ahead, right? Unless some very large corporations move into Maine and start to employ a lot of people, and we have an influx, the number of students, number of 18, 19-year-olds coming out of high school as our potential students is going to drop right off, continue to drop off. This is the same graph, but this breaks down. What I want to do is unpack it for you and show you how did we break that trend? How did we stop following the state demographics? Well, if you look at our in-state student credit hours, we actually didn't break the trend. We followed just right along with the changes in the high school demographics. So we held our own, if you will, in terms of the Maine students. Where we changed things was with out-of-state enrollment. And you can see what's happened. We had a gradual increase, but then we became much more aggressive around 2011, and we've reaped the benefits of that. We've been more intelligent in how we've gone about marketing. We've much more strategic in how we've gone about marketing. We've been much more strategic in how we use financial aid. And we've been successful in bringing out-of-state students into the university. And that's really essential for our budgetary health. This just shows these data in a little bit of a different way. This is each of the New England land grants and the percentage of in-state and out-of-state students. Vermont has always had a very low percentage of in-state. New Hampshire has been successful in bringing about 50% from out-of-state. We've historically always been around this 15 to 18%. So if we went back and charted this back through another decade, there'd be a little fluctuation around 15 to 18% out-of-state students. And you can see how then we've changed that trend over these last 5 or 6 years, increasing so that now our overall student body is 28% non-Mainers, or as we like to say, people from away. That's been the result of the last 3 years. About 35% of the incoming classes have been from away. Now, fortunately, we've been able to do that without really compromising the quality of students. I don't have the data. This is what I just told you, 36%. Average SAT 1087. That's about 3 or 4 points higher than the prior year. So we've been able to maintain that basic quality indication, and there's the average GPA. And again, if I showed you that over the years, little tiny fluctuations, but that's essentially where we're around at high school GPA. So the point is, we've been able to do this by recruiting good quality students from out of state to come and study at the University of Maine. Now, we have no aspirations to get to be like a Vermont, but I do think we can have if we could start to think about getting the whole number, the whole percentage up to maybe 35% out-of-state and international students, that will do a lot towards stabilizing our budgetary situation. So this is, now let me get down to next year. This is what we're projecting for next year. We took in a first-year class of 2,047. We are looking to bring in 2,151. Again, just to give you some grounding on that, the year before, well, we brought in 2,068, and the year before that we brought in 21 something. So it's ambitious, but it's not unrealistic that we can get up to 2150 first-year students. And again, how are we doing this? I don't see, oh yeah, there is. How are we doing this? See the man over there, Joel Winkowski, our interim vice president for enrollment management. Spend 5 minutes with him, and he'll give you a real sense of it. Spend an hour with him, and he'll give you a detailed understanding. But we are doing some really, I think, some very good things marketing-wise. I don't know if you've seen our new commercial out there. We're doing some very good things that way. We're doing some very, I think, innovative things with the way we're packaging financial aid, and that will start to roll out. You'll see some of that in the papers and in our public statements over the next couple of weeks. So that's where we anticipate being next year. This is student head count at 10,889. So I've switched, as you know, from credit hours to head count. So what does that mean? Our total projected credit hours is 272,000 plus. So why do we care about that? Because it has to do with revenue. So what we're projecting is that we will be able to increase our revenue by $3 million in next year through enrollment changes and through some combination of enrollment changes, what we anticipate will happen with respect to tuition rate and appropriation. We obviously don't have those numbers specifically nailed down, so some of this is our educated guesses. But as we build the budget, that's the number that we're starting with on the revenue side. I'm going to turn things back over to Claire.
So the next slide should show the undergraduate tuition and fees, room and board costs, prices for the New England land-grant universities. And as we indicated, as we were building FY17, I think you saw this price, this slide last year. We are still the lowest combined cost in-state and out-of-state of all the New England land grants. The only land grant that is lower in out-of-state tuition is URI, but combined we are still the lowest. So these are the total in-state and out-of-state tuition, room and board prices. We had a question last year as to, well, what's the median income for the various states? And what we did is we took this information of what students actually pay for college throughout the New England land-grant universities. This actually puts household income into 5 different buckets, 0 to 30, 30 to 48, and so on. And this is in-state, it's for in-state students. So what an in-state student actually pays for each of these New England land grants. So if you look at the University of Maine, a student whose family is in the 0 to 30K would actually pay $13,000, and those in the, let's say, 75 to 110K would be actually paying $19,000 for their education. And then you can see where the other states land. So Sue, President Hunter, will be speaking to how we can capture, how we can lower the cost for our middle income families here. And she'll be showing that on a future slide. Thank you. Next. Okay. So we're going to look at the FY16 E&G revenue and expense budget. This is the, it's showing how much revenue we get into E&G. It's $242.4 million, which includes tuition net of waivers, $3 million in waivers. We have sales and services and transfers from auxiliary here, indirect cost recovery, and our unrestricted state appropriation. So all of this adds up to the $242.4 million, and this is where our expenses lie. So primarily we have 62.6% of our 242 is in compensation and benefits, and then the next largest bucket is really in our scholarships. in our scholarships, and then all other, including the shared services at 11.4. So this is our expenditure budget for FY16 as we move into creating our FY17 budget.
Okay, so let's look at these are the increases in projected costs and revenue adjustments for next year. So just running through the list, compensation, we have a number of negotiated contractual increases, there's promotional increases, there's post-tenure increases, so all of those have to be accounted for in the budget going forward. Utilities, I think that the increase in utility costs is somewhat self-explanatory. Signature and emerging areas. We, as a university, as a campus, these were areas identified through our strategic plan and then identified more specifically in a very detailed and elaborate and I think comprehensive effort led by the provost. Those are areas that we have as a campus identified as high priorities, and we need to continue to invest in them, not only to maintain them, but to advance them. Foundational areas. These are foundational instructional areas. And I think it was about a year ago when I was my first fall as president, and I went to a faculty forum that the provost led and had organized and led. And it referred to, we were looking at, and there was a discussion about foundational instructional areas. This is to really reflect agreement with and input from faculty. We need to make sure we're doing a good job in a number of the areas across campus when it comes to really the instructional component that benefits our undergraduates primarily. It's really undergraduate instructional areas. And we have to account for that, and we really do believe we have to invest in it to make the experience that our students have in the classroom the best it can be. Other academic priorities, rising tide, partner accommodations, library journals, exploration, art museum. There's a number of other things that we do invest in and have to account for with an increase in the budget. Research incentives, and this, I'm sure Dr. Kim, Vice President Kim will be talking about this, but it is an attempt and will be an attempt to bring more research faculty onto our campus in certain areas where there is the opportunity and the facilities, and frankly a long-standing, very well-established research enterprise that faculty will move here as research faculty because they have the opportunity to work with faculty and use the facilities, and in many cases perhaps use the fact that we are a coastal state. And then financial aid. You can see there's an increase in the amount of money allocated to financial aid. We continue to invest in financial aid. We know our competition, and we know what other schools our prospective students are applying to. And for both in-state and out-of-state students, our increase in financial aid, both for in and out-of-state, is vastly exceeded by net tuition revenue. So anybody who worries that we're investing in financial aid and we're actually not getting anything for that, that's absolutely not true. There are some changes, and Claire referred to one of them. I'm going to speak about two things, and then obviously Vice President Joel Winkowski is here, and he will be providing more detail at some other point. But looking at both out-of-state and in-state. So let's start with out-of-state. We're looking at being able to provide for our highly qualified out-of-state students a financial aid package that will allow them to attend the University of Maine for the same cost as they would pay to go to their in-state flagship campus. Now that means, somebody going to UNH, not just any state school in New Hampshire. It's a New Hampshire resident going to UNH and weighing that against the University of Maine and being able to come here for the same cost that they would pay to go to UNH. That still brings net tuition revenue with it. When it comes to in-state students, as Claire showed you on the graph that breaks down the cost that in-state students pay in Maine and where it falls, how that aligns with the various income brackets. What we'd like to do is be able to be more deliberate, and we'd actually like to be able to go after more median income families in terms of having them send their children here. And part of that is lowering the cost for median income families to push it down a notch. So when you look at that graph next year, you'll see that those families they'll pay less than they were last year. So, and that will be a program called Maine Matters. So we are targeting both out-of-state and in-state students with, we think, competitive and frankly aggressive financial aid packaging to promote enrollment, because it really is important for us to gain enrollment. Now, this was up there earlier. It's really a ballpark number. This is, this $3 million through a variety of calculations. The financial office, Ted Coladarchi and Deb Allen sitting there, working through. We think it's realistic. It's ambitious, but it's realistic to look to a $3 million net tuition revenue increase, and that's a part of going forward for next year. That gives us a campus priorities gap going. Whoops, sorry. Sorry. Here we are. That goes from this $7.5 million or $7.6 million, putting in that the positive variance there of $3 million down to $4.6 million as a campus priorities gap.
I did want to touch on this because this is a point I made a lot as we were going through these reorganizations when I was wearing a slightly different hat, and that is, making sure that on the university side of things, on the university services side of things, on the system side of things, that the costs are transparent, that they're clear, that we understand where we're making those investments. So, I won't go through this in excruciating detail, but we'll just touch briefly on each of them. I have reviewed all of those budgets line by line. I'm very confident that the costs that are in there tend to be the same compensation, the same cost pressures that the president's talked about. We'll continue to look at what those costs are. This number here, the 1.7, is not a reflection of all increased costs. A portion of that is the change in outcomes-based funding. Some of that is system services that were previously not centralized that are now, and so they show up in the chargeback, and the appropriation has been adjusted according to that. Funded depreciation, again, same conversation that we had here last year. That is a system goal to increase funding in facilities. I had the privilege of co-chairing that group for 18 months, fully supportive of that goal, but it needs to be balanced against the campus realities. And so, moving from this campus to move from where we are now to what the board's goal in FY17 would actually mean a $7 million increase. We felt that was not going to happen, and was just so unrealistic that it didn't even make sense to put it up here. But looking at the possibility that there will be some increase that we'll likely want to go forward with, and that will come anywhere from zero, potentially up to 700,000. And then we have had system-wide increases in insurance was another area. Things like cyber attack insurance, some of the things that have not been covered in the past.
I think you have more on there.
And then the math. So that does get you to the gap, an overall gap of about $7.2 million.
And so the next steps. The first thing is we'll be refining these revenue and expense gaps over the next couple months. As Claire said, we meet every Tuesday morning at 8:30 in the conference room in my office, so this is a weekly ongoing event. The gap targets will be assigned out to the various divisions on campus. I think the provost met today with the deans. Various vice presidents and directors will be getting their targets. They will work through, and it really is an iterative process. They get assigned a number, and by assigned I mean they get given a number. It's then up to them to talk about the impact of that number, to prepare an impact statement. So it comes back into the provost's office or to my office, depends which area it is, you know, explaining how they might go about that, explaining what impact it has on their operation. And it is meant to be a conversation. It is not, we send out a number, they say, yes, sir, stamp it and send it back in. It's not done with a calculator. It really is done through a lot of conversation and a lot of process. It's hard, it's going to be challenging, but it really will be done only by a lot of people working back and forth, and trying to come up with the best solution that addresses the campus priorities and minimizes impact on students and faculty and employees. Going forward, on December 7th, Ryan will actually make a presentation about the FY18 One University the unified budget financial plan, and all of what goes into that. And so I'd encourage you to be there, because you only heard a little snippet today, and when he talks, it'll make what we're doing on campus actually fit in better with this unified budget and what we're doing as a system. And so I'd encourage everybody to become, you know, frankly, more budget geeks this year than you ever have before. The next thing is January 20th, we'll have another meeting just like this. The budget has to go into the system by the end of January. As you know, we have a longer term. We have a winter term, an online winter term, so our actual beginning of classes is January 19th. We wanted to come back out to a campus meeting as soon as we could after the spring semester begins. So here it is, the day after the semester begins. So there's still 10 days for input as we finally, fully resolve what we're going to submit to the system. The process for input, we have a web survey, and I'll show you the screenshot in a minute. There's email, UMaine president@maine.edu, or UMCBO, so UMaine Chief Business Officer @maine.edu. And then here, it is the web page of the president, but there is a feedback form if you look under FY17 budget. So we're serious in that we are looking for your feedback, for your input, for your thoughts as we proceed. And you'll hear more as we go forward, certainly now that as people start working through and have a little bit more, they have some mathematical, some targets to work with. So you'll be hearing more of that as we go forward. Well, then let me thank you. This is great, and we will see you multiple times this year. I appreciate you very much. I appreciate everybody being here today. Thanks.